course, this is the Game of Thrones, the HBO series intro,
Yes.
which of course is a story, it's a fictional story, but it's inspired by the British and European history of the Middle Ages, especially, the many conflicts between the local lords and the Crown of England that took place in between 11th, 12th, 13th century, exactly about the time and the area where we are going to take you today. I really like the intro that has this animation where the castles just come out like a mechanism. I think it's very brilliant. And building a castle, it's really where lies the power of the political power. It's a kind of a way of basically creating this kind of affirmation of power. And so tonight we will explore an area which is basically the north part of Wales. Wales is basically this part attached to England.
Yes.
This kind of L shape is England. Scotland is on the north side, and of course Ireland is just across the Irish Sea. So Wales is one of the four nations that that part constitute Great Britain. And it has its own culture, its own tradition, its own language, which is quite different from the English. In fact, it's one of the few areas where the Celts survive. So who were the Celts? The Celts were the population who basically lived in Central Europe and in Northern Europe before the Romans arrived, starting from Julius Caesar in the mid of the first century BC. They were living from Switzerland, basically all over France and all the way up to Britain. So they were first conquered by the Romans. The Romans conquered England first, that they called Britannia at that time, so Britain, in around 40 AD under Emperor Claudius. And they work all the way up to basically the northern part of England by creating then the wall, the vallum at the time of Hadrian, to keep the northern population off in what is nowadays Scotland. Anyway, the Roman conquest westwards towards especially Wales and the mountain of Wales. Now, compared to England, it's mostly a flatland, it's mostly a lowland. So it was very easy for the Romans to progress and to conquer the population that were living in England at the time and in Wales at the time, basically the independent tribes. So it was very easy to basically make some alliance with some of them, promise them something, and defeat the others. The Roman way of penetrating or basically conquering England at the time was divide et impera. If you basically keep apart and separate the different people, you can just rule them. Anyway, it took them a lot longer to enter Wales, and especially North Wales. That is mostly because the area has some of the tallest mountain in Britain, actually the tallest mountain, which is Snowdonia here. It's the tallest peak in all Britain, and also it's quite cold and a difficult region. So they really struggled to conquer North Wales. It took something like 70 years basically to finalize the conquest of North Wales. The main outpost, it's what is nowadays the city of Chester. I can see it's a Roman city that was created as a castrum, for which we can still see in the center. This is basically the Chester city center. It's still nowadays a walled city. Let me just see if I can show you the walls somehow. The walls are out here, but we can't really. Let me just get back. So you can see there's a Roman amphitheater here. The area of the forum corresponds basically nearby what the cathedral is today, up here. This is the city hall, and this is the Chester Cathedral. So basically the Roman forum should have been around here somewhere. The stronghold would have been around here. So originally it was a military. It doesn't bring up the 3D. Anyway, there are still the walls around this area, if I may just turn around. So Chester became the main outpost in Roman times for the conquest of, through here we should be able to see the walls that are here. The walls down here, basically this part here all the way up here. The amphitheater was outside the walls. Anyway, this became the main outpost in the Roman times, and it was also later on in the Middle Ages, at the time where the English tried to invade and conquer Wales. Who were and who are the Welsh? Basically, they were this Celtic population divided into different tribes, and they stayed independent, of course, before the Roman rule. And then after the Roman left, starting from between the end of the 4th century AD and the 5th century AD, the Romans, as the eastern part of the Roman Empire was under attack, started basically to leave the farthest part of the Roman Empire. After that, of course, there were, the Welsh nation became independent again, divided into different territories, and the Normans in the 11th century tried to conquer Wales with little or no success, and this brings up to the time where there was the attempt of the English to unify the whole of Britain under their rule by defeating the Welsh and the Scots. Now, in the 11th and the 12th or 13th century, there were the baronial wars. Basically, the barons, which were the local lords, rebelled against the crown, and was basically Henry III, who had a lot of troubles with them. Now, his son Edward later, became King Edward I, was the one who basically, learning from the difficulties that his father had, he basically decided to bring under more strict control the entire area. Now, this is King Edward I. He was a very peculiar figure. He was born in 1239, and he was very tall for that time, was just over 6 feet tall, but he was quite a high man for the standards of the European Middle Ages, where people were quite short. And he basically saw his father struggling with keeping at bay all the little local lords and the barons. There were 2 different rebellions, 2 different wars that the king had to fight with, basically his own lords, his own barons. So basically, Edward realized that he needed to have a more strict control. So when he became king, he made a number of reforms, including tax reforms, in order to have a stronger grasp on his own people. Anyway, King Edward was known as Lord Edward before it was crowned, before his father died. And between 1271 and 1272, he was the one who led the last crusade. Now, crusades started in the 11th century. There were 8 of them. The 9th crusade was basically just the last part of the 8th one. And in a span of about 200 years, they established a presence of the European kingdoms in the Holy Land, basically Jerusalem and the region in the area. Now, it was an important experience for the future king, because he realized how important it was, how fortresses and castles were important to its to maintain a presence and to maintain a military presence. He also learned how a defeat of a castle could basically turn the destiny of a country. And I will bring this later on. We will talk about the castles. Now, I was just looking for another image of the king. So during his trips to different parts of, I don't have it here, different parts of Europe, basically he went south from London down across Europe, and he put his base in Sicily before then going to Accra, which was the place at that time. Jerusalem was already lost, but in the between nowadays. Basically here between nowadays Israel and Syria, that's where the last Christian state was. Anyway, it was lost not long after, by the end of the century. In 1272, after a number of victories and securing a temporary peace for the small Christian state in the new land, he came back to England. It took about 2 years to come back, and on his way back he learned about his father dying, and then he was told he was going to be king. And probably he passed to Constantinople, and this is very important because he later on used some elements from Constantinople to the architecture that was developed in England. And then again, he passed through Savoy, which is this region here between France, basically this region here between France, Italy, and Switzerland. This is the Lake Geneva. And it's very important because there's a number of castles here that were built by Master James of St. George, which is basically a French castle builder, a castle architect that was working at the time for the House of Savoy, which were the lords of this area at that time. And basically they built a number of castles which are still existing and are still in prime conditions. Now, by 1274, King Edward made his return to England. He became king, and then he had a big problem straight away. The problem was that South Wales was already part of England, was already under the English rule, but North Wales was not. It was actually independent. I should have a little map here of Wales. This is the map of nowadays Wales, and then I have I don't have it. There it is, the castles of Wales. So what he did basically, the northern part was an independent state ruled by Llangwin, which was basically an independent local king, which conquered, basically, who was ruled all this area. There was a war between the king and the Welsh, and eventually the king was able to push all the remaining Welsh troops in this island of Anglesey here, which is basically there is a strait basically between the mainland and the island, and to secure also North Wales, to secure for a little time. Now, originally he started to build a number of castles on a sort of a kind of a ring that started down here with Aberystwyth and ended up here in Flint, both close, one on the coast and the other one close to the border. There were a total of 8 castles that were built by King Edward I. The first ones were these Rhuddlan, Flint, and Crechet and Aberystwyth. And later on, the larger castles were built. So today we will focus basically on 4 main castles, which are the Castle of Harlech, Caernarfon, Conwy, and Beaumaris, which are basically some of the most magnificent and some of the largest castles which were ever built in the United Kingdom, and I would say some of them in the world, especially Caernarfon. So
Mario, how long?
Yes.
How long would it take to build one of these? I mean, it would seem like it would take a lifetime.
So, well, the king put a lot of effort and money into that. So, on average, the castle took between 3 and 4 years.
Wow.
Not full years, just
Wow.
building season, which corresponds to the March till October or November, because then during the winter it's too cold, they couldn't build anything.
Yes.
Now, the first one I would like to.
It's over there.
Yes, it's.
Are these like the Egyptian pyramids? They were built by I mean, obviously they weren't slaves, but no, we're not. I mean, did they pay, or I mean, were they subjects that were basically, you know, a little more than slave wages to build them?
No, so the king had to raise an enormous amount of money in order to pay the building of the castle. So let's get to the largest one, which is here. It's the Caernarfon Castle. So it's this one here, basically. Let me see.
It's interesting that they could pull that off in 3 to 4 years when you've got like the dome in where is it in Germany that was like not in Cologne that was like 900 years being built.
Well, it all goes back to the money. So I'll show you this. This is Caernarfon. This is the largest one of them all, and it's connected with the will of power that Edward had over North Wales. So first of all, for hundreds of years, the Welsh had rebelled against the British rule, and you know, there was always this kind of idea people would have rather died than being under the rule of anyone else who wasn't themselves. So this castle here that has 9 large polygonal towers, this kind of you know, kind of striped decoration in the stonework. So first of all, it was built on a rock, and it was built by the sea. So this is quite unusual. Traditionally, the Normans already had tried to conquer North Wales, and the Normans uses this kind of fortification, the traditional motte and bailey kind of structure. So like a tower, there is one in York, I think, as well. There's a motte in York as well.
Yep.
Yes. So they're very common across all of England. It was basically very easy. On a higher hill, you build a kind of a hill, a wooden structure, very easy structure to build, very quick and very cheap. So just to answer the question about who built it, how much it costs, and how fast, it's I'm going to answer it now in the next couple of minutes, but just bear with me with this. And then at the bottom, the bailey that had basically you know, the stables, the worships, the main hall, and everything that they needed. So in case there was an attack, just for safety, they had somewhere where to fall back and wait. The problem with this kind of structure is that was very easily it could be surrounded, it could be sieged for a few months. Now, Wales, especially North Wales, had one advantage, which was the weather and the time. It's very cold, very damp, very humid. If any army was there in the winter, just the winter would have defeated them. And that goes back to Game of Thrones. Winter is coming. That is exactly the point. You don't have to fight an army, just have to wait it out, and the winter will do the rest. The armies will starve and die and be cold, and that's it. So King Edward just believed that he should have placed his castles by the coast, by the sea, so he could refill them. He could had supplies coming from Ireland, from Scotland, from England, so he would have never ran out of basically of supply. Now, this is how Caernarfon would have looked like back in times, with, of course, a large common hall where to dine, and then the king's and the queen's quarters as well. They're not preserved now; they're just the walls kept, so there's no inside parts. Very little actually preserved of the castle. Carnarvon, which is a huge castle, it costed back then some £30,000, which would be the equivalent today probably of about $50 million or so. And it was basically the building for years by professional builders. They didn't have slaves back then. So slavery was abolished, since it's now a hot topic as well. Basically, it disappeared in Europe, corresponding with the beginning of Christianization. So by the 4th, 5th century, the slavery didn't exist in Europe anymore. But it was the time of the Crusades that basically the Europeans started to trade prisoners with the Arabs. Now, the Arabs had slavery, and they did slavery with, poaching slaves from Africa and from wars. And they started to do this trade with the Westerns. And that's how the West and the Europeans, they find out how much money you can make by trading slaves, and all the process. That's how slavery came back to Europe. And then the European empires, English Empire, Spanish Empire, the Portuguese, and the others, spread it to the world again. But there was a time where there wasn't slavery yet back in Europe at that time. We're in the 1200s, so it was only later on, especially in the 1500s, that slavery became big, because it was a big business. Back to Carnarvon, which is some beautiful pictures. You see the waters, the place is really amazing. You can see these large polygonal towers, these large strongholds. Now, the reason for choosing this town, which was also an original Roman town, was connected with the Roman legend of basically Maxen Wildig, which was the Welsh name of a Roman emperor at the end of the 3rd century, Maximus, which was basically a Welsh legend of a Roman emperor dreaming about a beautiful woman and dreaming about beautiful castles. And then he sent his people all over the empire to find this woman. Eventually, this woman was found in the area which now is Carnarvon. So the King Edward was reconnecting with this ancient Welsh myth in order to basically create an image of power, which was also something that the locals would recognize, because they knew the legend that there was an amazing castle in the area, housed to a beautiful queen, and then there was a way to basically appropriate the culture of the Welsh. So I said it was built in only 4 years, and it was built using basically medieval technology, but with some inventions that are due to this master who basically built them. James of St. George, which was basically a French architect. You can see this is the statue, Beaumer Castle, and yes, the tools of the builder. Now, this is again connected with the Crusades, and in the after the fall of the Roman Empire, lots of construction technology and techniques were lost. The Middle Ages, were the so-called Dark Ages, were so because they didn't know how to build machines anymore to build stuff. They've lost a lot of knowledge. So it was the Crusades which brought back a lot of this knowledge from the Arabs, because in the Middle East, the knowledge from the Roman builders, from the Greek builders, was preserved. It wasn't lost. And so that's how they were able basically to build large cathedrals again, to bring back this knowledge from the Arabs. So that's why the Templar Knights, they had a lot of interest in learning how the Temple of Solomon was built, how these large buildings of the ancient Middle East were built. And probably they found someone there who had this knowledge, because it is passed on and they survived. So the Crusades were also a big cultural melting pot. This is a miniature from a Middle Age book and shows the building of a tower with a scaffolding that is built with some boards just perched into the wall. Now, that's why the Middle Age walls, both of towers and castles, they have random holes in them, because those holes were used to put the planks to build this scaffolding. Instead of having to build it all the way down to the ground, they were using it. And then on the top, they had what? A kind of a wheel to basically activate a crane to pull up materials. Now, some of the stones that are used in the castles on the upper tower, some of these blocks, they are as heavy as 2 tons. So it's not something that you can move by hand. You need a machine to move it. And that's exactly how they did. They used this kind of wheel, kind of like a giant hamster wheel, where people would be walking inside, activating basically these pulleys to lift up the blocks on a tower and to build the towers. This is a Middle Age construction works. Another thing, I have some other pictures. This is a reconstruction of the model. You see, that's the man walking inside, activating the pulley, lifting up the blocks. And the Middle Age walls were actually built similar to the Roman technique. So a large block of local stone, but very well engineered on the outside, and then on the inside a mixture of rubble, cement, and other stuff was basically put in a form of a liquid. So at the bottom, this foundation needed to be very strong, because otherwise the liquid would have pulled out the stones from the bottom parts. That's why at the bottom the blocks are bigger and more sturdy than at the top. Also, I might have another illustration of that. This is the treadmill winch, basically. So they basically use the winch where people can just, walk inside, and then this would, pull up the thing. This is something, isn't it?
Oh my God.
And then let me just see. So,
So Mario, how did they get the blocks? I mean, I know if you had a water system, that would probably be. I mean, is it just horse and buggy?
They had the most of the stone came from the rock on which the castle was built. All these castles were built on rocks. Okay. And so that's also the shape of the castle is like that, because basically this is the shape of the natural rock on which it's built. And or they quarried that not very far from it. So yeah, of course they had wagons. They most likely they carried it down using the sea, and they deployed to some storage area, and then from there they handle again to the castle. So but being by the water, probably they used the water as well. Now the Carnarvon Castle has this kind of lines in the walls, and these are precise reference to some walls that probably the king would have seen or had accounts of during his travels. These are the walls of Constantinople today. So these are Roman walls. These date back to the time of Theodosius, so end of 4th century. And so, they are 1600 years old. So the walls of Halle Castle are exactly the same. All the other castles were painted white, and they had round towers. So there was a very precise message that the king wanted to give. He wanted to build a fortress, which was a fortress like the Romans would have built. And that's why he used the Roman kind of style, the Roman kind of technique to build them. Large polygonal towers with the striping backgrounds, like the walls of Constantinople. These are the tribal. Constantinople had 3 sets of walls, so the tribal walls of Constantinople. Just to be sure, And so also the gates at Carnarvon were very, very impressive, because they were, let's see if we can pop in and see. So you can see this has 2 separate bailey, which basically were dividing the troops' quarters from the king's quarters on the other side. Yeah. This is the round place where the investiture of the Prince of Wales was done. This picture was actually taken 3 years ago, maybe. They did a temporary poppy celebration. The poppy flowers are worn during November, the first week of November, the second week of November, for Remembrance Day, for the marks the end of the First World War. So everybody wears one poppy flower to, people who have fallen in the wars. Yeah. And this was a temporary installation, was done maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I don't remember when, but we went to see it. So I remember this, like a kind of a cascade, a red cascade. And then
Wow.
another time they had dragons there, because of course dragons are a Welsh thing. You could see how impressive are the towers, and like 9 of them, 9 polygon towers. And you could see basically how high the walls are, how complex is the structure, and also the big towers are they have on top small turrets, small military turrets. So this is a castle that is made, you know, it's like a real war machine. It's not just a statement; it's also an active war. Let's see if we can get on the top of one of the tower. War outposts, and it wasn't just, let me see, yeah, this in the another one, it wasn't just for, you know, for like a landmark, like a message. It was also an active military outpost.
That does beg the question then, was it ever attacked?
Yeah. It's not longer after it was finished. They all were attacked, and the first war was the one that saw the killing of the Prince of Wales, Llanddwyn, which was the leader of the Welsh at the time. And about 10 years later, there was a rebellion led by another prince called Madog, and he was actually able to take some of these castles, including Harlech Castle, which I could show you now, which is another one of the ring. The castles, no, let's go here. Okay, turn around. So Harlech is down here. Harlech, it's a beautiful castle as well. So let's see if we don't have that. So it's up here. You could see it's basically on another rock with a vast valley here next to the coast as well. Harlech was taken, basically there were only 30 or 40 soldiers at that time manning the castle. It was taken, they just enter straight away. And also this is Harlech Castle. You can see round towers. Imagine it would have been painted white. And then let me see if I have another Harlech Castle here. Yeah, this is the gatehouse as well. So traditional, you know, round one. The castle actually had some features, like, for example, this is on the castle. I have. So this is how Caernarfon was when it was in use. So basically the castle here, the town walled as well. And then on the side, this is where basically Macdog, you know, from Anglesey, they were able to invade again North Wales. They burned, they destroyed the castles, and they damaged it. Caernarfon was the one that was damaged most, because the walls, these outside walls as well, weren't finished yet. So basically that's what happened. So consider that the war against Llanddwyn took place between 1282 and 1283. That's when the Prince of Wales was killed. And in 1294, so about 10 years later, there was a rebellion led by Madog. But basically, after a couple of years, they were fought back, and again they were killed. Now, King Edward I was. This is King Edward with a wife. It was basically a ruthless man. some stories said that before he even became king, when he was a young lord, he was working with his guards, and then a man passing by gave a strange look at him. So he ordered to his guards to take an ear out of the man and an eyeball out, just because he looked at him probably in a funny way that they didn't like. For no reason, there was no words exchanged. So this was the kind of man we're talking about. So of course he had his enemy's head. When Landwin was defeated in 82, he was actually with a trick. They were able to get him out of the battlefield, and then they were able to ambush him. He had his head chopped off and sent to London to be put on a spike with a crown on the Tower of London. So there was an ancient Welsh legend of a king born in Wales that would have ruled of all of Britain, on Scotland, on England, and on Wales. And so he was a way to mock, this thing by having the Welsh prince coronated, just his head on a spike on a Tower of London.
Wow.
So this is really, really kind of a gruesome way. Anyway, later on in the 1400s, there were another war, another set of rebellion, but that ended with the beginning of the War of the Roses in 1410, because the situation escalated, and eventually by the end of 1400s, a prince born in Wales, Henry Tudor, became the King of England. So basically a Welshman sat on the English throne. So the prophecy, after all, was real. It just was not the right century. So things happen, but sometimes you have to wait for the right century. Let's see the other castles and how they were built. Basically, the main castles that were built, like Halle and also Carnarvon and the Caerphilly and the other ones, they were all built to last and to stand a siege a few months. In fact, during the war with the Welsh, the English troops, about 8,000 men, were basically inside the castle of Halle for about 3 months, which is a long time in a small area to be confined, and they were receiving constant supply of foods. They had so much supply of food when they left after the siege was over, they had piles of grains and piles of food that was just going to rotten away, so they were just giving it away for free. So this is because the main fear was to lose supplies. Why King Edward was obsessed with that? Because not long before he arrived in the Holy Land during the Crusades, this castle here, the Crac des Chevaliers in Syria, so it's in the Holy Land, it was one of the last Christian castles, or the Templar castles, to fall to the Arabs, and it fell for one simple reason. Now, this is a picture of the castle. I might have another one somewhere of the Crac, maybe not. The Crac. No. If you look at the picture of the Crac, so it's on the top of a mountain dominating a valley. It's very difficult, basically, to take the tall wall. How do you think they took the castle in the 1200s? The Arabs, how they defeated the people in the castle?
Surrounding it.
Surrounded.
Yeah, and then doing what? Just waiting it out? Or how do you stop them getting supply? What do you think this is?
They see. Blow the sea.
They blow the bridge.
This is a small aqueduct. I did give you some more clues. This is a small aqueduct. So they didn't have any wells on any water. There was an aqueduct that was carrying the water to the castle. They blocked the water from the aqueduct. Hence, no water. In a few days, after a few weeks, they were just done. And so the Crac was taken. This was a shock for the Christian world at that time, because it meant that the safety of the last Christian kingdom on the Holy Land was basically compromised. In fact, it didn't last long. About 3 decades later, the presence of the Christians in Holy Land was gone. The kingdom was defeated. Anyway.
And where was this located?
This is between Israel and Syria.
Okay.
So let me just, I can locate it for you, but I have to search this. There it is, in Syria. It's not a place you might want to visit anytime soon, but hopefully in a few years. Sadly, because it's beautiful, it's got a lot of archaeology. So here, there it is, the Crac de Chevalier. Basically means furnace of the night. You see, it's on the top of the mountain. It's very beautiful. And it was one of the strongholds of the Christians during the Crusades. There was a number of castles built in that area during the Crusades, and the border is not far. I think. Let me see. Yeah, it's just down here, isn't it? The border is this one here. So this is Syria, and this is Israel down here. Okay. Oh no, this is Jordan. So let's go. No. Wrong place. Let's go back to England. Basically, here we are. The castles that, you know, for centuries they didn't know who built the castles. It was only later on that a scholar was able to identify some peculiar features that no castle in England had before the castles. This one, the castle in Switzerland, the Yverdon, which was built by the same master, James, as well as this is some pictures that show the similarity between the castles in Sayon at the bottom and the castle, and the castle of Conway. So basically, Sayon is at the top, but Conway is at the bottom. Basically, you know, they are the similar kind of shape, so it must have been the same architect. And then here, that's the Castle of Chillon, that has similar polygonal walls like Caernarvon. Also has those holes. I don't know if you could see them here. These square holes is where the boards were put, so put the plank on so they could walk and bring the materials out. They were put in a way that the planks, instead of being horizontal, so parallel to the floor, as they would have been in England at the time, they were as a sort of a ramp to go out. So in a continuous area, they could have, you know, walk up and do it instead of having to using ladders or staircase or other thing. They could have just walk up using the kind of a spiral system. The castle is very well preserved, and there is a picture of the main hall. That this is the whole of the castle. I'll just show you the picture from the outside. We can give you a look and feel of how those castles would have been inside. Very much like the series Game of Thrones. Have you seen it? Have you seen the HBO? No.
Yeah, some.
Martha wouldn't let me watch it.
It's a bit. I think it's there is a bit too much violence, and you know there's a lot of nudity, so it's a bit.
Oh, it's great. It's
yeah,
great.
it's a bit. But it's a good. Yeah, they made it. Yeah, they wanted something to very easy to basically to you know, for people to follow, because it's very complex. So here you have basically the plan of Harlech Castle, and you can see they were made by the end of the 1200s, and you can see that there's a different sets of walls with, of course, you know, a part built on a rock, and then surrounded by a ditch or a moat, and moat, and then the different towers with then of course the chapels, the granary, all that kind of parts.
Now,
But
where
the
was
structure, how the gatehouse was built, this is very peculiar, because even if they were able to take the first sets of wall, there were a number of gates, a number of doors or walls, and then this long and strip corridor. Now this corridor goes is dark because it's vaulted, and it goes all the way up. So you have to go uphill. You are in the dark, and then probably there were traps and holes on the top from which they could throw stone on your head, hot oil, urine, whatever they had. And so, you know, like the
Yeah.
typical medieval. So this castle was very, they were designed with violence in mind, in a way to harm and to attack whatever was trying to storm the castle. So they were almost impossible to take.
So,
Mr. Carrick, is that how you design your things?
Say it again.
Yeah, I'm messing with somebody else.
oh, I was curious then. On the diagram there, I don't see any residence type areas. You know, like were the royals actually living in there? And if so, I mean, where would they have been? Would they have been in, you know, one of those things labeled as the outer wards, or where would their living quarters have been?
So in this one precisely, I think they were on the second floor on this body here, just above the great hall, the kitchen, that kind of part here on the above, because these are on several stories. I'm not 100% sure, but probably in this area here, it's probably connected with the chapel.
And out of curiosity, how many people would have been on this particular one? How many servants would they? I mean, how many people would be inside the walled area?
So you're looking at 10, 15,000. So in the general area, in the big one like this, in where is it? This is, well, it depends which castle we're talking. Harlech is quite small, so not many, probably in the region of hundreds. But in Carnarvon, which is quite big, I do have. They had in the region of tens of thousands.
Wow.
Really? Oh.
This is kind
Yeah, they were big. Yeah,
so this is
they had
big,
to-
and it could host a lot of people.
Yeah.
Not just in the main palace. The main palace is always in the under of few hundreds, but then no, in outside they could have. So during the Madoc's rebellion, King Edward had some 30 or 35,000 soldiers mobilized from England into Wales. 35,000 is a huge number for that times. Consider that the country would have had only maybe 150,000 inhabitants. It wasn't that big. So not Wales, I'm speaking. So, you know, 30,000 men, you know, it was a huge operation. It would have been a huge operation nowadays. Let me get the map or the plan of Carnarvon, because Carnarvon has large quarters for the kings and the queen. So here there were two bailey, a big one here with the kind of this banana-shaped great hall, because this was following the rock, so you had to kind of fit in the wall. This was the main great hall with everybody had like their lunch, their supper, their dinner, like you see in the movies, you know, in the Middle Ages. So everybody is having like a dinner in the main hall, and then there were these apartments with the king and the queen rooms separately, and then there was they had windows opening towards, you know, the sea and the coast, so like kind of a penthouse view. If we can go inside the Carnarvon Castle again, I have no, this is not work. We can see, so
The parking space there.
No.
No, yeah.
you could see this large windows with this opening for the archery, for the, and the quarters would have been right here, built right down here. And how can we, let me just get down here. Yep. So we might not see from here. Anyway, up there are some large windows that overlook basically the coast and the sea. So they would have some large windows for that, plus a number of other openings. Yeah, you could see them here. There's much larger opening. A number of openings in order to be able to shoot at different angles with the bow and arrow. And Caernarfon is also connected with the incoronation. Well, not incoronation, with the investiture of the Prince of Wales, for which I have an original video from the 1960s.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
We have Prince
It is
Charles.
definitely no place in this world, which is perhaps somewhat cynical. But I think it can mean quite a lot if one goes about it in the right way. I think it can have some form of symbolism. For me, it's a way of officially dedicating one's life or part of one's life to Wales. And the Welsh people, after all, wanted it. And I think also that the British, on the whole, tend to do these sort of ceremonies rather well. And for this reason, it's done well, in fact.
So this is the ceremony when he was coronated Prince of Wales. The heir to the throne, it's the Prince of Wales. That since the 1400s, in order to make the Welsh feeling more part of Britain.
God bless the Prince of Wales, they sang. Those mighty Welsh voices bore the message of the people who were to welcome Prince Charles as their own. This young man was ready to take up his royal office to serve the proud race who opened their hearts to both him and his mother, the Queen, on this historic July the 1st. The Grey Fortress was a place of rejoicing on this day. While the crowds cheered their monarch, the young prince, with a dignity and assurance belying his years, followed the centuries-old pattern of ceremony and went to the Chamberlain Tower to await the Queen's command. Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen and her consort were regal figures as they moved towards the place where the joyous deed of investiture was.
So you could see the ceremony taking place at the series. Where is it?
That was pretty serious, right there.
Oh, this is the. And then I want to talk about one last castle. So this is from the series, the Crown.
Where the preparations are now complete for the.
This is the TV series, which is on Netflix, The Crown, where
Oh, yeah.
So this is the fiction. Which was shot in Caernarfon as well.
A good response from the
We saw the series.
only a few boos can be heard, then otherwise the Welsh people showing enormous support.
And during the speech, they show the. Yeah, there's.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, to become your liege man of life and
So the
limb,
red dragon is the symbol, the coat of arms of
and of earthly
Wales.
worship,
Well,
The red
yeah.
dragon, a dry cock in Welsh.
and faith and truth I will bear unto thee.
And then this is the part of
Even
the
in Gymru,
speech in Welsh.
Anrhydeth on heddiw. A honey and a lleoliad hanesyddol hwn. And a gair, a splenith, a welwn and compass.
So this is the Welsh professor here watching the
Yes,
scene. So here's
yes.
the professor who told him. Which was, of course, in fact, he called him by name. Okay, the last of the castles that was built, it was actually finished much later. It's the Beaumaris Castle, which is very peculiar Just a few words about that before, because it wasn't built on a rock, so it didn't have to match the shape of a particular rock. And this was actually left unfinished. It's here. It wasn't finished because the king then had, first of all, different problems. The Scots had rebelled, so he had to go and fight against the Scots. And then eventually, after he died, the castle basically, and then also he needed to raise a lot of money. To raise the money to build the castles originally, a total of £80,000, equivalent probably of some, the equivalent of some $150-200 million nowadays. The king had to raise taxes on all the country because they didn't have enough money. So Beaumaris, which is here, it's on the last part, which is not secure, which was Anglesey, where the last Welsh troops had, basically was an area where the Welsh had no, let me just find it's like this, it's easier. The English had no presence.
Love the Welsh names.
Langwyd, Llŷllen, Llangollen. They have different sounds than English. So this is Beaumaris, a castle, which is, you see, is not built on a rock, it's built on a plain. So with this, Master James, he could design whatever he wanted because it was not limited by the rock. And so he designed the perfect castle. So this is the ultimate castle. It's perfectly, square with the towers, the mast at the center, a moat, and so it's as you want to design it to be perfect. Also, I don't remember, the other day I was watching a documentary about the castle.
Moat at one time go
all the way around, all the way around, and was filled. Most of the moats were filled 19th century, 20th century. Some of them have been redug again for historical reasons, but most castles had the moats closed. This is because whenever the water sits so much, it causes a lot of trouble, as you might know. So they fill that and then they reopen it. Let me just see some pictures. So this is the plan, you see, and basically there's with two different axes and then a barbican and a very, very geometrical and symmetrical kind of shape. And it was basically, let me see if I have a reproduction of it. Yeah, this is how it should have looked like, but unfortunately, it wasn't finished. But it was a beautiful castle, and also with access with the water, so it could be directly supplied or constant supplies. You see, the boats could arrive right at the entrance of the castle, and so there was no problem to be cut off and be again taken by the. This is probably the most beautiful in the design. This one and Caernarfon is the two most beautiful castles. I might have a video. Yes, this is a very nice video. This is an aerial view of the castles. And you can see they are the most magnificent castles probably in Europe because they are in the 1200s. The castle like the kind of Disney-like castles, they were built much later in the 19th century. German castles, the French castles are mostly in the Renaissance, and the German castles later on in the 1800s. But these ones are the real, 1200 castles. Of course, they're castles all over Europe. Italy only has some 5,000 castles. So the castles.
5,000?
Italy has 5,000. Britain, I think, a little bit more than that.
The smallest one is smaller,
There are, the castle, because basically whenever there was a town, there had to be a castle to be, to be keeping it.
to protect it,
There was Beaumaris somewhere. Yeah, this is it. No, it's not this one. No.
Look at that one.
This is Arlech. This one is Arlech. Arlech is also probably the position is the best for the outlook it has, and the drive there is very beautiful because there is the Snowdonia, this mountain here, and the scenes are beautiful. There's also, and then I'll finish with this last thing. Let me just show. Yeah, so this is Anglesey, this is the Snowdonia. The peak is always in the mist. You never see the peak. It's very rare. It's on the always surrounded by mist. It looks like out of a Lord of the Rings kind of movie.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people, hikers, in it who die every year because of the.
Really? How high is it? Do you know?
The weather.
It's 1,300 meters. It's about 4,000 feet, just over 4,000 feet. So it's not very high, but consider England is mostly flat. It's quite a height. You could see. And then not far from Arlech, there is a kind of a very strange place, which was built in the 19th century to prove that the Welsh coast was no less than the Amalfi Coast. So there's a little fake Positano built on the Welsh coast. And it's called Portmeirion. It was, I'll show you. It's right here. And it's a number of little buildings built on a kind of a steep coast at the estuary of the river, and but this is not the Google thing is not. Let me see if I can draw a pin, and it's quite peculiar because it does look like a little Italian village, except for the weather and the food as well. The food is dreadful. We went there last year. The food is dreadful. It's not.
God.
So you can see the domes.
The rare bit tonight, so we'll have to do that later.
The church and the little. It's totally different.
Oh, yeah.
It's totally different that what you would see
They have
there.
mutton to eat, right?
No, the food. It's not.
But that's sweet.
Yeah, it is, and also it's like a holiday resort,
Oh,
and you
look
can
at
visit.
that.
And then they shot a series in the 60s or in the 70s here, and they also have they made porcelain. Portmeirion porcelain is kind of a thing here, so people really love it. It's quite peculiar. It always made me think of, it's the owner of this land wanted to say, oh, the Welsh coast is as beautiful as the Amalfi Coast. Let's build an Italian village.
Just don't have the weather or food.
No,
They didn't bring the
definitely not.
chefs.
The food is a lot
That's
better.
right.
First time I came to England, it was in the 1997, and I was working in a restaurant as well. And then I was 17, and then 96. The food was dreadful. It was terrible. Now, especially London and the cities, they have much better food, but in the country, not so much. It's just because they don't really care. And now.
Here we go.
So this is the Welsh anthem.
Oh, you Lauren, yeah.
So last year, 2 years ago, I arranged a tour in Rome for my wife choir. My wife sings in a Welsh choir called Cyrenian Singers, and my dad sings in a choir in Rome. So the two choirs sang together a couple of times.
Aww.
And they sang each other respective anthems. So my wife's choir prepared the Italian anthem, Fratelli d'Italia, but the other choir, the Italian choir, they prepare God Save the Queen. meow, meow,
Oh,
meow, 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 meow. And so as soon as they said that, I didn't think about that. They didn't tell me. And so when we arrived, they said, okay, so, and then we sing together God Save the Queen. And then the Welsh choir said, no, we don't. We sing the Welsh anthem. And then they provided them the score and the words, but of course they couldn't read it. So that wasn't very good. No, but it's actually the music score is much better than the